Hi YouTube, this is Rachel from Sunbear Glasscraft, and oh my goodness, I have not made a video in so long, but thanks for your patience. I'm here, I promise. Everything's great. Honestly, I'm just staying super busy with all of my commissions, so my lack of video posting, just know that it's kind of a good thing because that means I'm really busy. So I'm sorry that it's taken me so long. I saw that I have so many more subscribers now, so thank you all, welcome. But today we are going to cover soldering and everything that you will need to know for soldering. Now, I am entirely self-taught, so I've had no formal training other than maybe watching videos, seeing other stained glass artists live streams, and this is, I've been doing this for over a year now, and this really does work well for me. So you might try something and like it better. So this is just kind of my take on it and how I have kind of evolved and basically just how I do things. So it might vary from artist to artist. That's with every technique, whether it's, cutting glass, scoring glass, breaking it, what have you. Everyone is just gonna do things slightly differently. This is just what works best for me. So let's first go over the setup. Whenever I have my station set up, this is usually how it looks. I have my smoke absorber off to the right. Obviously I have my project there in the middle. I like to keep my flux in a little cap. They're really easy to clean. It's just like a water bottle, like a water jug cap. They're really easy to clean. My sponge, I just use a regular old sponge. I use 60-40 solder primarily. I've never tried 50-50. And then I'll have my iron off to the upper right because I'm right-handed. I also have special gloves that have like a rubberized palm to them that I like to wear when I'm soldering, just so I can prevent the lead from touching my hands too much. For the temperature settings, I usually keep mine at 410, which is 410 degrees Celsius. I used to turn it down to 360 when I would bead the edges, but now I just keep it on 410 all the time. I've tried putting it at the higher settings. I really don't like it because I find that it heats up so much that my solder will actually start running through much more often. So it's just a hassle. I just like 410. If you use 50-50 solder, you will have to use a higher temperature because it has a higher melt point, so just keep that in mind. This is just all with using 60-40 solder. Now, if you're just starting out, this might be closer to the iron that you have. This is a hobbyist level iron, and this is what I started out with. I don't even know the brand. I think it's just Inland brand. And a lot of times they'll have these little power thingies, mini phaser, where you can adjust the power that goes to it, which will adjust the temperature. When I used to have this, I would solder at about 75, maybe 80, whatever that means. And then whenever I would do the beading for the edge, I would turn it down to about 60. So if you have something like this, that's a temperature number setting that you can set it at. Or at least it's the one that I had the most luck with. So let's get into the actual setup. These little push pins are optional. Some people use them to stabilize the project, keep it from moving around. I think it's more effort than what it's worth, so I don't use them. Once my project is all laid out, that's when I'll start applying the flux. Now, I only apply the flux to the joints first, and then after I tack the project, meaning after I put the little beads of solder to connect it all together, that's when I'll apply a thin, even coat of flux to the entire project. So here you can see I'm just applying it to all the little joints. And when I'm tacking, I will first tack all of the pieces around the outside of the project. That way it kind of holds all of the inner pieces together. So you can kind of see that here where I just go around to all of the joints, kind of closer to the edge of my project. Sometimes when I'm tacking, there are pieces that move slightly. For me, it's an easy fix and I just kind of boop, put it back and it's fine. So this is all just personal preference though. Some people get really anxious if they don't pin their project down with those safety pins first. It's just entirely up to you. You just have to see what you prefer. As I've said before, once everything is tacked, that's when I go in and apply my nice even layer of flux. This is something that will take time to figure out how much you're gonna need. It's really just finding the perfect balance of not too much and not too little. You want everything to be covered, but you don't want it to be drowning. So you just gotta find the Goldilocks zone. Now this step is absolutely optional. Not everyone's going to use copper wire in their projects. I personally use it a lot because I like the details that it adds, but I mainly wanted to include this that way you could see at what point in the soldering process I add my copper wire. So it's after tacking, after applying the full layer of flux, that's when I'll go in and kind of tack all of my little wires in. These wires are very, very conductive. They're copper, so they get very hot. In this video right here, you see I'm wearing, it's actually a hot glue gun finger protector. I love these, they work really well. I originally purchased them for grinding. They got cut up too quickly though, so now I just use them for heat protection when I'm doing these little itty bitty details. For soldering, some people will like to tin their entire project before they start the actual soldering to get that nice bead. Tinning just means going through and applying a thin layer of solder to all of the copper foil. I personally don't do that because I don't find that there's a big difference when I tin versus when I don't tin. So like I said, personal preference, you can try with and without tinning to see which one you prefer. I think my best advice for soldering is going to just be for the speed. You want to be consistent with your speed. I find that if you go too slow, you risk heating the glass too much or heating the solder too much, and the glass can either crack or the solder can melt through to the other side. And if you go too fast, you can have really uneven solder lines. So really it's just the key is getting a nice consistent speed, taking your time with it, but not being too slow. It takes some time to figure out. You're not going to be perfect when you start, but just try your best to just be consistent with your pace. Something else to keep in mind as well is because the goal is to get a nice rounded bead on your project. So there's different techniques that I use to get my bead how I want it. Now for longer areas, generally I will use a continuous flow method, meaning I'll put the roll of solder underneath my iron like you see here, because it'll just give a nice continuous amount. I don't have to keep going back and forth, like when I do what I call the bit by bit method. Now, when you take little bits off of the roll, like what you see me doing here, it gives you more control. I find that if I use the continuous flow method, sometimes it's hard for you to gauge how much solder is underneath your iron. So if you're kind of uncertain, I usually find that doing what I'm doing here, where I'm just taking little pieces at a time, that's how I prefer to solder. I feel like I have more control that way. You can see I get kind of closer to my project with the roll. And I just like doing it this way, kind of slow and steady, versus using a continuous flow. So let's change up the angle and I want to show you how I connect my solder lines. So basically you're going to just let the heat do the work for you, and you're going to hold your iron down on those joints until you see the surrounding area melt. That is how you're going to get the best connection to the different intersecting lines. And I do the same thing for incorporating the copper wires. Now there's one thing that I didn't film for this, and it's how I put my lead came on my piece. So as you can see, I'm leaving some of the copper foil unsoldered around the edges, and that's because I'm leaving room for my lead came, which is going to be a U-shaped piece of lead that's going to create a really nice finish border around the edges. So I'll leave this little gap, that way I can apply that lead came. It's just too much to film and like wrestle with it. I still kind of have a hard time with putting it on, but as you can see, I applied it and then I connected all of my solder lines to the lead came. So now we just want to flip it over, apply our flux, and do all the same stuff.
Something very important to keep in mind is whenever you are soldering the back, there are air pockets that form from the solder coming through the other side. And this, whenever you solder over it, can create these air bubbles that splatter and pop. Please make sure you're wearing eye protection. You should have been wearing it the whole time. So if you're not, my goodness, put some dang safety goggles on, but especially now because this is when the most splatters and pops happen. Your final step is going to be applying jump rings to your projects. I use the same copper wire, it's pre-tinned, that I use for the details on all of my projects, and I just use pins like Sharpies and ballpoint pins to size them properly. It's important that whenever you're applying your jump rings to not apply it where it's only connected to the lead came. You want it to be connected to the joints of your project as well to give it more stability.
Alright, so I think that just about covers it for my soldering tips and tricks. I really hope that this helped you, and just keep in mind that this is something that takes a while to learn and to get used to, and you're not going to be perfect. The first time you do it, I guarantee it is going to be a struggle. And this is something that even I struggled with up until, I don't know, I would say at least 5 months ago. I did not feel confident in my soldering, so it took me a full 7 months of doing stained glass before I even felt anywhere near confident. I hope my math is right on that. But it's just something that the more you do it, the more you practice, the better you're going to get and the more confident you're going to feel. So like I said, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them below. I try to stay on top of my comments. You can also feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram. So definitely feel free, like if you comment and I just never see it on here, like shoot me a comment like either on any of my pictures or just feel free to message me. So I hope this helped. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this content, please leave a like and consider subscribing, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.